In today's video, I'm going to share with you some great nature and gardening books, which I absolutely love. First up, I'm going to talk to you about two practical but beautiful gardening how-to books that I read last year, and I'm super excited to let you know about. Next, I'll share with you two interesting nonfiction books that focus on gardening that I am currently reading, and they're both so good I can't put either one down. Then I'm going to share with you about two mystery series. They're lovely, comfy, cozy mystery series. One of them is set in an apple orchard and the other a peach orchard. And of course, they both include lots of delicious recipes at the end of the book. And I know they're delicious because I have tried them myself. Then I've got two super fun books that focus on nature in unusual ways. And that's going to be almost at the end of the video, so make sure you stay tuned to see what those are. I think you're definitely going to be surprised, and I think you're definitely going to like them. Then the final book I'm going to share with you is a library book I just borrowed the other day, and I've already started reading it. I'm actually reading it for a February foodie readathon that I saw on the Untrained Librarian channel, and she had a lot of great ideas. But I already had this particular book, and I have several others on my shelves that I want to get to for this particular readathon. And in one way or another, they all have to do with gardening and fruit orchards. But today I'm just going to share this one particular one that I got from the library that I think you will love. So that's 9 nature and gardening books, and I'm sure that at least a few of them are going to pique your interest and have you looking to either borrow or buy them very soon. So first I have How to Grow Perennial Vegetables, Low Maintenance, Low Impact Vegetable Gardening by Martin Crawford. Now, I love Martin Crawford as an author, and this book is great, like all his books are. First 60 pages, he explains why we should be growing perennial vegetables and then talks about the best ways to grow them, starting with the basics, the soil, but also just how to maintain them, how to harvest them, everything really that you would need to know to get going with perennial vegetables. The bulk of the book, though, from page 65 up through, I think it's like 205, it's all gorgeous photos of these perennial vegetables. One by one, he discusses these vegetables and he tells you, how hardy they are, what zones they grow best in, how to cultivate them, how to get them to produce the best. Also, their culinary uses, maybe any problems they might tend towards. Just all sorts of useful information. And then at the very end of the book, he has a valuable chart that includes all the Latin names and common names of these perennial vegetables, in addition to, various other names they have started to go by through the years. Just a super helpful book to have, so educational but beautiful, and it works if you're an aspiring food forester like me with a couple acres of property or more, or even if you just have a small patio garden. The next book is How to Grow Your Own Tea, the complete guide to cultivating, harvesting, and preparing. And this book is by Christine Parks and Susan Walcott. Now, when it says complete guide, that is what it means. It has the history of tea, where it grows best in the States and around the world, different types of tea, what kind of compounds are in tea, how best, of course, to grow it, whether to start it from seed, and if so, how so, and also, how to best get it to grow and produce, how to prune it, how to harvest it, and how to use it, of course, to make tea, but also even in cooking. I really love this book. I do grow now Camellia sinensis plants. They take several years before you can start harvesting them, but I look forward to that day, and even now I want to educate myself so I know best how to, make use of those tea leaves when I get the chance. And also, as this book teaches, how to propagate these tea plants. So if you have any interest yourself in the world of growing your own tea, then be sure to check out this book. All right, now we have a couple of cozy mysteries. I do love a good mystery, whether it's Agatha Christie, some of the contemporary mysteries that are out now today, and cozy mysteries. They're probably my favorite because their themes so often are either really interesting about a topic I love learning about, or they're related to gardening somehow. And these two, as I said before, are set in orchards. In the first one, One Bad Apple, we have an apple orchard. Of course, it's in Massachusetts, and this book is number 1 in a 12-book series. I have read them all and I love them. Like all cozy mysteries, there are murders involved, but they're not too violent or gory. At least you don't read about that part. It's all fun seeing if you can follow along with the clues, the way that the amateur sleuth in the book is doing, and if you can solve the mystery before they do. Usually you can't, but that's okay. It's still super entertaining. And in the case of orchard mysteries, there are almost always delicious recipes in the back for you to experiment with. And I have definitely done that with the recipes in this series. Now, in this particular series, Meg is the protagonist, and her mother has recently inherited a 200-year-old farmhouse and a 15-acre apple orchard. And Meg, in a bad way at the moment, comes to help her mother out. She decides to renovate this place and take over the apple orchard herself. It's a little more than she bargained for, but she's pretty determined to see it through. Gets a little more complicated, though, when a dead body is found in her new septic tank. Now, this orchard mystery series starts with book 1, A Peach of a Murder, is by Livia J. Washburn. And there are 15 books in this series, although if you go online, you might only find the first 14 unless you do a little extra digging. And that's because the first 14 were traditionally published, but then Livia published the 15th one independently. And all of her books have rave reviews, including the most recent one, the 15th one that was published in 2021, I believe. And I just love this series. So does everyone else, apparently. So obviously it's a peach orchard mystery with that title, and it is set in Texas. And the protagonist of this series is Phyllis. She's a retired, widowed school teacher who is in her late 60s and very, very sweet. Everyone just thinks so highly of her, and she really is sweet. However, when the annual Peach Festival comes around every year, she does become very competitive. She really wants to win. And this year is no exception, except that a dead body turns up. And so Phyllis turns amateur sleuth, and it's so entertaining. I love these books. And actually, I'm thinking of rereading them, the whole series, this summer. Now for the nonfiction books that I'm currently reading and enjoying a lot. The first is Wintering, The Power of Rest and Retreat in Difficult Times by Catherine May. This book was published in 2020 and is a New York Times bestseller, and it meets such a real need. It goes into how during challenging times in your life, you need to winter, or basically hibernate. Now, most of us tend to do this naturally. However, we often feel guilty about it. And in this book, Catherine May goes about showing us why we should not feel guilty, why we should accept this wintering, understanding the many benefits of it. Now, the book is structured in that each chapter is a different month. September being the lead-in, it's when she wrote the book, faced a lot of difficult things going on in her life all at once, and that kind of sent her down this spiral towards wintering. So it's sort of the prologue. And then October through March, we have the actual winter, each being a different chapter, each focusing on a different element. And it is just so refreshing and comforting to read this book. And then at the very end, late March, we hit spring. And that is definitely how it feels. You're coming out of it. You know things are going to be okay, and you have benefited from that time you spent resting. The other fascinating nonfiction book I'm currently reading, I learned about through another YouTube channel. That's What Vivi Did Next. And several months ago, she was talking about some books she was reading. She does that often. And this time she was talking about this book. And I immediately ordered it and don't know why I haven't read it until now, except that I have piles and piles of books to read and they all look so good. But I'm very much loving it at this point. And this book is An Almost Impossible Thing, The Radical Lives of Britain's Pioneering Women Gardeners by Fiona Davison. So Fiona Davison was the head of libraries and exhibits at the Royal Horticultural Society, and she discovered a cache of letters from a young girl named Olive who had been denied a scholarship by the Royal Horticultural Society. And it got her to thinking and started her researching the broader problem that women gardeners or aspiring women gardeners faced during the years leading up to World War I, before women had the vote. Now, this book follows 6 different women ranging in age from 15 to mid-30s and examines how they went about breaking into the professional world of gardening at a time when it absolutely wasn't allowed for women. You have to remember that at this time, really, no professional work was allowed for women of the middle or upper class in Britain. Certainly, lower class women were allowed to work. They were expected to work. But middle and upper class women, they were expected to marry. And if they didn't marry, they were seen as a burden, really, on society. The beginning of chapter 1 in this book really expresses that sentiment very well. Let me read it for you. In March 1910, readers of the Daily Mail were confronted with an advertisement which read, 10,000 Englishwomen could be ranged in a line and shot. No one would be sorry. Everyone would be glad. There isn't any place for them. This was pretty strong stuff, but it was just an extreme example of a widely held belief. The country was burdened with surplus women. It was estimated that in 1854, there were 500,000 more women than men in Britain. And less than 40 years later, in 1891, there were over 900,000 more women than men. So they really felt like they had a big problem. And their answer, of course, was to send all these surplus women off to, say, Australia, where they could be married and be of use. Women saw it a little differently, however. They wanted the vote and they wanted to be allowed to work. And one of the jobs they wanted to get into was gardening. I've been really intrigued by what I'm learning in this book so far. A lot more going on here, a lot more at stake than what you might think on the surface. And I look forward to giving a much fuller review at some point in the future once I finished it completely. But yes, an almost impossible thing. If you're a woman gardener, I definitely think you should get this book. Just discovered my light was going. It's one of those gray days and the sun was peeking out from behind the clouds, but it disappeared. So I've turned on some more lights. Hopefully you can see me just fine. We're almost to the end of the video, but we've got 3 titles left, and these 2 are the fun ones I promised you. A little unusual, but really nice. First, I have Floriography, an illustrated guide to the Victorian language of flowers by Jessica Rue. Each double-page spread has an illustrated flower. Now, I'm not an artist, but I think maybe they were done with colored pencils. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but they are so lovely. And on the opposite page, the flower that's being highlighted has several things explained about it. First of all, we're given the scientific name. Then we're given the meaning, the origin, and some flowers it can be paired with for specific occasions. So, in the case of chrysanthemum, now, the scientific name of chrysanthemum happens to be chrysanthemum. As to the origin, it talks about the fact that chrysanthemums are often used at funerals and placed on graves throughout Europe. And this flower is thought to be a token of comfort in a time of grief. Suggested pairings are willow for a friend in grief or gladiolas for a friend with a broken heart. How about dahlias, or as some people say, dahlias? Here in Northern California, though, we do say dahlia. Now, the scientific name happens to be the same, dahlia, and I guess I just picked 2 where that was the case. Now, the meaning of dahlia is eternal love or commitment. Now, this flower was frequently used in wedding bouquets in the Victorian era, and it's often called the Queen of the Autumn Garden because if you've ever grown it, you know it blooms well into the fall. One of the suggested pairings for the dahlia is a tulip, to be given as a gift to a newly engaged couple. Now, before I got this book, I knew nothing of the language of flowers. Well, I knew that roses meant love, and I think, don't yellow roses mean a returning love or something like that? I don't know. So anyway, obviously, I needed this book to teach me some things, and I am enjoying looking through it. I'm actually going through a few pages every evening. It's very relaxing. I'm not sure how much of it's going to stick with me since I'm not like quizzing myself or anything. Maybe I should do that. Maybe I'll give that a try. I should at least learn the meanings of the flowers I grow here, right? How are you at knowing the meanings of the flowers you grow? All right, on to the next book. This is one of my favorites to share with you today, right up my alley. It's called Gardening Can Be Murder: How Poisonous Poppies, Sinister Shovels, and Grim Gardens Have Inspired Mystery Writers. And this book is so good. It really ties together mystery writers and the stories they tell to poisonous, sinister plants, and I love it. The author, Marta McDowell, has actually written other books about gardening where she highlights one particular author, and I also have the book she wrote about Emily Dickinson and her garden and how that influenced her poetry. But this one, she goes through and highlights many different mystery writers through the years, from Edgar Allan Poe to Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, to many current day contemporary mystery writers. And she shows how they use gardening within their books, either as motivators to get them thinking of a plot, or as a murder weapon, or as maybe a setting. She constantly refers to all sorts of authors and books and stories that have me so interested. I'm compiling quite a long list that I need to investigate and see what else I want to read that pertains to this topic. It is quite interesting to see how authors come up with their ideas and how they insert them so seamlessly into their stories. And when it's a mystery, well, all the better. Of course, I'm not taking any of these ideas for myself. I'm not going to be planting any poisonous plants, at least not for the purpose of murder, but maybe for the purpose of inspiring my writing. All right, the very last book, the one I borrowed from the library the other day that I'm going to be reading for the February Foodie Readathon. It is called The Book of Difficult Fruit: Arguments for the Tart, Tender, and Unruly with Recipes, and it's by Kate Lebo. Now, I've never heard of Kate Lebo before, but apparently she is a naturalist and a poet and writes beautifully. In fact, on the back of this book, one of the many blurbs, one of the many recommendation quotes is from an author I really love, Amy Stewart, who wrote The Drunken Botanist, among other books. She says, Kate Lebo is the best kind of poet naturalist. Her writing is savage and lyrical and scientific all at once. Now, the structure of this book is quite unique. She has 26 chapters for the 26 letters of the alphabet. There is one chapter in the middle that is quite different, but all the rest, the letter is the beginning of the name of an unusual, tart, tender, or unruly fruit. Now, how are these fruits difficult? Well, in many varying ways. Maybe they have a very narrow window of time to harvest them. Maybe they tend to overrun a garden. Maybe they're quite difficult to harvest, full of thorns and such. But one way or another, most people consider them difficult. Now, each of these chapters is an essay written so beautifully and so meaningfully. It's amazing, really, how Kate Lebo connects these fruits and the way we grow them and harvest them or prepare them to other aspects of our life. Let me read to you a bit from the flyleaf to explain this a bit more. These fruits will take you on unexpected turns and give sideways insights into relationships, self-care, land stewardship, medical and botanical history, and much more. Now, I saw some familiar fruits in here. In fact, I grow some of them. Rhubarb, quince, pomegranate, medlar. But there are also a lot I don't grow, and it was really interesting to learn more about them, but mostly to see how she tied them into our lives. Just a really worthwhile book. I'm about halfway through and really enjoying it. If, like me, you are of a curious nature and you love good, beautiful writing, you will enjoy this book. So thanks so much for joining me today and listening to my sharing about these books about nature and gardening. And I hope you enjoyed it. More than that, I hope that you took away from this some books that you're going to go out and read yourself. And if so, let me know in the comments below. Also, let me know any book titles you think are great nature and gardening books that I should read. So until next time, happy gardening and happy reading.